In solving this rational inequality, I got to start out with a numerator equals 0. So 20x squared plus 21x plus 4 equals 0. And that's just a whole lot of unfun. Now, this is not a problem that I would put on test because the numerator is too much of a pain. The numerator actually does factor, but that's okay. We don't necessarily need to factor it. We need to know where it's equal to 0. And if you can't factor it, what's your alternative? What's your fallback on this one? Quadratic formula. Now, quick look as to what the quadratic formula looks like for this one. I mean, it's not pretty, but it does work out. At this point, when you have the square root of 121, you'll know, and I wouldn't copy this down, not yet. When you have the square root of 121, that's a perfect square. You say, oh, well, yeah, I guess I could have factored that one. The square root of 121 is 11. Now, one at a time, you got to solve these. Negative 21 plus 11 over 40. Negative 21 minus 11 over 40. That gives me negative 10 over 40, which is negative 1/4. Here I get negative 32 over 40. What number goes into both of these? It's more than 4. 8, well done. So negative 4 over 5 for that one. So there's my two solutions. As decimal values, well, let's see. I'll let you kind of be surprised on that. Now here's my workaround for you when you're at home. If you're at home like, I don't really want to solve that, but WebAssign's giving you some ugly looking problem like that, take a look at this equation. And let's come back over here. Take a look at this parabola. Do you see anything similar? I hope so. They're the same, right? 20x squared plus 21x plus 4. Same here as it is here. So here's my little trick for you. We want to know where this is actually equal to 0. And the cool thing is that Desmos can solve that for you. Desmos has already got it solved. It's right here and right here. Negative 0.25 and negative 0.8. And if you're not sure, it's like, well, I don't know what negative 0.8 is. Here you go. At the bottom here, I just typed in that number, negative 0.25, and it gives you a fraction. What's the fraction for negative 0.8? Well, let me just change that to negative 0.8. And it's negative 4/5. So at home, if you want a little shortcut on some of this, there it is. You can also do similar stuff on a graphing calculator. Now what else? Now I need to figure out where the numerator equals 0 as well. That's not going to be as tedious as the denominator, I hope. So from all this, I needed to know that x equals negative 1/4 or x equals negative 4/5. That's the two things I've got. Where the denominator equals 0, you just solve. What's my value of x here? 1/4. All right. So let's put these on a number line, just like we did before. And you're going to need to test these. Now this time I'll show you how to do it on the graphing calculator. So this is negative 4/5, negative 1/4, and positive 1/4. Because we got all these fractions, it might help you to keep around the decimal values. So as far as the decimal values this is concerned, this first one is negative 0.8. This is negative 0.25. And this is positive 0.25. And if you want to use decimals or fractions, I'm not really going to make a big deal out of it. I do like fractions a little bit better. Help me out here. What are the intervals? Negative infinity to negative 4/5. Awesome. Negative 4/5 to negative 1/4. Negative 1/4 to positive 1/4. And the last one is 1/4 to infinity. Thank you. You need to test points in each of these intervals. Now, by writing these as decimal values, I'm hoping it's going to be easier to find a point between these things than it would be if you're dealing with a fraction. A lot of us, if we were dealing with a fraction, you just shrug yourself. I don't know what's between -4/5 and -1/4. But when you see it with decimals, then it's going to be a little bit easier. So let's take a look here. What would be a good test point for this interval? What's something between -0.8 and -0.25? Any decimal. Yeah, -1/2. So -0.5. That'd be a good test point. As far as testing these things is concerned, let's do this on the graphing calculator. The first thing that I want to do is I want to check your table setup. So you hit the second key, then the window key. It takes you to this table setup, and I want your table setup to mirror mine. That is, you've got auto for independent, ask for dependent. Next, you got to put in the proper equation. It is really important that you have parentheses around the numerator and parentheses around the denominator. Without parentheses, it's going to give you something much different than what you're asking it to, or what you want it to do. So you type in the equation, and then you can test some points. So to get to the table where you actually test the points, kind of like what we were doing with desmos, you hit the second key, then the graph key. If there's some old numbers here, you can delete them. So let me just delete those. And one of the numbers I wanted to test was -0.5. When you type in a negative number, don't use the subtraction key to put in a negative number. Use the opposite key on the bottom of the calculator. Press enter and, ooh, wait a minute. Oh, I forgot to turn on this graph. That shouldn't be a problem for you guys. There you go. -0.5 gave me a positive 0.5. Now the relevant information is not that I got 0.5 in particular, but that I got something positive. So I'll put a little plus there. When it's all said and done, are you looking for the intervals that test out positive or test out negative? Which one? Negative. Good. You want to know when this is less than or equal to 0. You can also spend a little time testing the endpoints. I mean, do you want to include the endpoints there? So for instance, the endpoint of this interval is -4/5 and -1/4. You can type those in as test points to see if you want to use those. So for instance, if I type in -4 divided by 5, it's going to turn that into a decimal as soon as I press the enter key. But then I get a 0. Can I use something that gives me a 0? Yes. All right. So, and you can keep on testing points until you figured out which intervals you want to use and which endpoints you're going to include. If you're going to include it, then it gets a bracket. If you're not going to include it, it gets a parenthesis. Infinity and negative infinity always get parentheses. So there you go. All right. I'm going to let you work on things. I'll come around and try and help you out. If you have some questions, please get some help.